Howard. Howard? Howard, are you there? Hello? Hello? Shh. Sài Gòn ơi, ta mất người những người đã mất tên, mất từng con phố đổi tên đường. Khi hẹn nhau ta lạc lối tìm, ôi tình buồn như đã sống thêm. Sài Gòn ơi, ta mất người nhưng người đã mất tên, mất mộ bia đá lành hương nguyên, như trời sâu đã bỏ đất liền, còn gì đâu. Ai ra đi nhớ hàng mẹ già, thu công viên hoa vàng tường đá. Thôi em rồi ngày tháng xa xôi, theo dòng đời trôi. Good evening, America. I'm Michael Chang. This evening, we report to you live from the crash site of Cyborgia, the lost lecture, Technosynchro and Cyborg Synthesis by Minh Tran. Let's go live to Cyborgia now. Minh? Minh, are you there? Minh? Ah, here we are. Oh my. Minh, dialing Minh Tran. Good evening, America. This is Michael Chang. I have been told that Live from Cyborgia now is a presentation on decolonization from a being named Howard, who is a social construct of the social artist Minh Tran. So, live from Cyborgia. Well, I hope everyone landed okay. Firstly, I did want to thank everyone who reached out to me after America Dreams, and I've been sent poetry. I mean, as an artist, that's the ultimate. That's the ultimate, right? Is that the art lives on and it inspires other people to make art, to make other art, other things, inspires ideas. So thank you for everyone who followed up after America Dreams and sent me your thoughts. And they have congealed. And this is the sophomore effort to America Dreams. So let's get into it. I will explain the hyphen at the end, I think. That's the interactive part. I would like to hear from you all your perspectives on it, but I am choosing to not only hyphen, but emphasize the hyphen in Vietnamese-American perspective, a decolonial. I wanted to emphasize a kind of irony, as well as a, a presentation of what is as well, and a kind of I want to deconstruct the notion of original sin, thereby borrowing from postmodern ideas and moving forward, I think, into what I and my colleagues in the doctoral program in depth psychology, specialization in integrative therapy and healing practices, shout out to the dears, are sort of cooking up this sort of postmodern notion together. What is a postmodern field of consideration and discourse? So I'd like to walk through some iconic images that I would like to consider as artifacts of the points I would like to make in this lecture tonight. So this is a worldwide phenomenon now, right? The Vietnamese bánh mì. And what a lot of people actually don't know about the bánh mì is that it was used early on during French colonial times as a kind of guerrilla tactic that folks would have with each other as a coded message. So bánh tay or bánh tay is literally translates to Western bread. Well, often, you know, these people who carry around these carts with these baguettes in them, instead of saying bánh tay, they'll say đánh tay with a D instead of a B. And đánh tay means beat the Westerners, beat them up. And so it's a slight difference, but as a native with an indigenous ear, you would be able to catch the difference between đánh tay and bánh tay, or đánh tay and bánh tay. Moving on to the Vietnamese Latin script, which is formally called Quốc ngữ. And this was actually invented by a Portuguese Jesuit missionary. His name was Francisco de Pina. And this was early in the 15th century, actually, that this Latin script was invented, that phonetically sounded out the Vietnamese language based on, and he did some pretty incredible studies, this man, based on the different dialects of the different regions, and came up with essentially a system that really nicely compromised in order to make the language as simple as possible, given the various dialects and various ways of pronunciations, and still this Latin alphabet was so popular. And now this was a tool, right? A tool to proselytize and to convert and to colonialize thought and heart, essentially, and as well as economics. But it eventually became what the Nguyen dynasty adopted, the French colonialists adopted as the official language of Indochina, and the Ho Chi Minh adopted it. Most revolutionaries adopted it. The only people who kept the script that you see to the right of the screen, which is called Chữ Nam, is a Chinese character base, Vietnamese converted, and then complexified character-based system that was used before the Quốc ngữ in the early 15th century. Quốc ngữ caught on like wildfire. It was so popular, it became, because it was so much more easy to learn than the Chinese characters, which remained in the aristocracy. The only people who wrote and read them were mandarins of the court and poets of the haute bourgeoisie and the aristocracy, really. And so during Ho Chi Minh's popularity, it was used as a way of rhetorically working against their aristocracy, of course, because he represented the socialists. So we see here that a tool of the colonizer was worked against the colonizer. Now, this is an interesting, I would say, it might fall again under guerrilla warfare, using the landscape, using the natural landscape of a territory in order to effect guerrilla warfare, but to use the social cultural landscape and to use that landscape with guerrilla tactics is, I think, what the bánh mì and the Chữ Nam are about. And here's another example that I think is in the blood, the bone marrow of the Vietnamese people, if you will. This is, I'd like to introduce the Đạo Mẫu, Tam Phủ, Tứ Phủ of the Vietnamese people. This is an indigenous system that predates Buddhism, actually, and remains in practice today. And this is the topic of my dissertation and Fulbright grant proposal. This is what I will be spending the next few years of my, next few years of my life focused on are these goddesses. Now, what I want to point your attention to that is relevant to the discussion, or I guess it wouldn't be a discussion because this is pre-recorded. Hi. This presentation, this lecture, is the figure to the bottom right, dressed in black. Now, Tam Phủ, Tứ Phủ, Phủ means realms, translated as palaces or realms. And the middle one represents, she's a sky goddess, she's a sun goddess, which I find very interesting as well, because she is in potential, she incarnates. And she becomes what the woman in black is supposed to represent, which represents the goddess of the earth and the underworld as well. And then the woman goddess dressed in white. To the right is the goddess of the oceans, and then the realm to the left is the goddess of the mountains, dressed in green. So what's interesting is that many scholars have spoken about how it's the three goddesses that then a fourth came in, the one in black, and she's often seated below the three goddesses, who leads the pantheon of goddesses, of other deities as well, but is these 3/4 goddesses. And what's interesting is the fourth one represents the ground and the underground. And so, theologically, I suppose you can use that word. They say that the reason is because the reason that the goddess in the black is beneath, and it's usually the three that are often represented, is because the sun goddess, the one dressed in red, incarnates. She represents incarnation, and she's in touch with solar consciousness. But she's also a goddess, so she's embodied, and she's particularly incarnating. She's becoming, and she's becoming the goddess in the black earth. But the underground part of it, I think, is an image of subversion, or perhaps a historical representation of subverted Vietnamese matriarchal, matrilineal, and feminine psychic dispositions that became subverted from centuries of Chinese domination, a millennia, we say. One, to be exact. We've been around for a while, 4 millennia, as the saying goes. So moving toward a postmodern way of thinking, the first bullet point I have there highlights that this idea from Steve McIntosh, and the notion that postmodernism is always in reaction to modernity. It doesn't quite do much on its own other than criticize modernity, although it is a legitimate worldview and a necessary one and an important one when it comes to things like becoming more communal minded and so forth, the values of postmodernity. A postmodern worldview, however, as this example taken from the profession of architecture, works with landscapes itself. So remember guerrilla warfare and decolonialism, which I think I would like to place it, the kind of decolonialism that I would like to point our attention toward, is more in line with a postmodern worldview because of the following reasons, right, that I'm making. The postmodern's metaphysical skepticism is taken into consideration. However, it also returns the attention back towards grand narratives that are drawn not from systems of oppression, like my example with the Portuguese missionary, but indigenous wisdom, timeless patterns, right? Or archetypes, if you will, sacred geometry, as well as harmony with nature. We see that a lot with architecture in postmodern ways of working, where they will work with the landscape. And this is interesting in that it often will require an earth-based sensibility. So an earth-based consciousness, as I'm considering it, which is in touch with indigenous wisdom, because indigenous lineages and practices are earth-based. And the Dao Mao is very much earth-based. It is. It doesn't actually concern itself with the afterlife at all, really. It is far more focused on the ins and outs of everyday life, of our human affairs, and how they are affected, though, by these adjacent realms and realities. Critical appreciation is what I am calling it, and I think it's an apt term, because it looks at our ancestry and our lineages, not from a purely just deconstructing place, right? So if you carry any colonialist blood, and as a Vietnamese person, I also carry colonialist blood. I mean, we colonized Laos and the Khmer Empire, and we excuse me, there was something in my throat right as I was out to say that. Interesting. Because I've said this before, but to name it, we've had historical genocidal efforts upon the Champa people and the Champa Empire. So it's a critical appreciation of our lineages, but it is also an appreciation I don't uh, I don't like to return to the notion of the original sin that I'd like to do away with, is that it works from a shame-based place, which can be easily hijacked, you see, for one. Shame is the best hijacker of our behaviors. So just think about that. Yeah. And two, I'd rather work from a place where you feel secure in who you are. And that comes from a more Eastern disposition, which shies away from a notion of original sin. I don't think there is I mean, I can relate to the notion of original sin because as a gay man, that is a kind of, that was very original sin-ish growing up. But even then, it wasn't really at a spiritual level, for me. Now, that direction, I think, is not only is easily hijackable, but also I think stops growth to develop. I think you just have to feel good about yourself, and to feel connected to your lineage in a way that feels good is important. And in a way that's multidimensional, in a way that is critical of itself, the way that a person who is on the path of individuation might be critical. On to another icon. This is somebody who recently literally won the Icon Award at the People's Choice Award for the music category. This is, of course, the beautiful, the dirty, the fighter, genie, Lady Marmalade herself, Extina Legentina, Christina Aguilera. What I want to point your attention to with Christina Aguilera over here is that her hair that she did during the stripped era to the right, and she brought back for a little medley she did recently at the People's Choice Award. It's strands of blonde and black hair. And what she did during her strip era was she took the image of like the pop princessy, sort of like Britney Spears rival, genie in a bottle, and she literally eclipsed, she turned it dark, she turned it black. She dyed her hair black, she got super tan by the end of her stripped era. And this is part of her artistry. You see, she was unfolding it before the public eye. And during the 2003 VMAs, we all remember the kiss between Madonna and Britney Spears. Now, there was another person next to them that, you jot a little memory and people remember, and that is, of course, Christina Aguilera. And the other two were, of course, blonde, and she was the black hair brunette, super tan at the time. And there was this image that I saw when I was watching it, even I think live at the time as a teenager. And feeling like this eclipse was happening, this moment in pop culture, which it did become. And of course, Christina Aguilera was the shadow, and she often carried the shadow in pop culture. Now, a lot of people have issues with Christina singing in Spanish because she doesn't really speak Spanish. But I think if you really listen to her singing, it's pretty undeniable. She taps into something that is ancestral. Someone who really carried the shadow for Hollywood in a way where the lighter side didn't really get emphasized as much, unfortunately, is M. Night Shyamalan. He is admittedly very Hindu. He's very connected to his Indian origin, and the spiritual side to his films, I think, is lost on many people, unfortunately. Some say he's made a recent comeback with films like Split and Glass. And he, of course, is known for his twist endings. And speaking of twist endings, so people ask me, who is Howard? And I don't know yet, it's emerging, but Howard is, if you've been following on any of the outlets I've been putting this concept of Howard out on. Howard was actually my American name used during grade school. And this whole Promethean idea is that I want to reclaim Howard. This notion that I had to make myself more palatable for the mainstream, the mass culture. And the keeping of the hyphen is that I was always told growing up that it was an option, that I was Vietnamese and I was American and I was Vietnamese-American, and that there was something special about being Vietnamese-American, that identity with the little Saigon community that was really meaningful to me growing up. And so I have always kept the hyphen. Somewhere along the lines, the hyphen they got rid of it in postmodern mainstream academia for various reasons that I've looked up, that I've read about. But I was always told that it was an option, and that I wasn't stuck with that, and that I liked the option, and that it was a meaningful option for me. Like I said, the identity that I have growing up as a first and a half generation, also all hyphenated Vietnamese-American in the little Saigon area of Orange County. But I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, a part of what Howard is that it's a self-reflective persona, of my public persona. And I want it to reflect the audience that that follows it, because I think we're always mirroring each other. So I would like the kind of content that I put out there to be mutually growing in that way. Yeah.
Time and space are the lifelong companions in our life journey. The nexus of time and space is the intersectionality of country, nation, community, family, and self, with the past, present, and the future. Now, how you relate to your country, to time and space, will determine the issue of your roots, your identity, your national and individual DNA. That DNA is inherited, recognized, but also built upon and developed. These are inescapable questions. What are your roots? Where do you belong? Whom do you belong to? What is your identity? Now that is what I mean when I said, you can't build a future without owning your past. Now, what lies ahead? What challenges lie ahead for Vietnam and the Vietnamese? During the war, greed, this basic human instinct, was naturally muted by deeper and more powerful drivers of our actions. Today, in peace and plenty, we the Vietnamese, we are faced with a threat of greed, unleashed, shameless. And this is an existential threat to our legacy and identity. During the war, we were grounded in our local and national reality, no matter how harsh. Today, as we move into the world, as we are more of the world, we still need, in fact, more than ever, to nurture our roots, our sense of belonging to a specific place, community, nation. Culture dies hard. Culture is what is left when you have lost everything, as the French writer says. Culture makes us human. The Vietnamese culture and character has enabled us to absorb, to assimilate, and to turn into our own the changes that we've faced through the centuries. And today, it enables us to live with the paradox of reconciling globalism and individuality. Those of you who belong to the worldwide Vietnamese diaspora do embrace the richness of biculturalism, the culture of the society you live in, of the country you're a citizen of, and the culture of your origins. Nurture your biculturalism or cross-culturalism. And then you can confidently move out to the world, secure knowing who you are, where you belong, and what you can offer to the world. And remember, in this day and age, you can belong to more than one place. The global and the local are in you.
Howard? Howard? Are you there? Can you hear me? Howard? Hello?